Welcome to the 12th House Podcast. I'm Michelle, the co-host and your head witch in charge here at Holisticism. I started Holisticism to help creative, intuitive, spiritual people actualize through their sacred work. And at the 12th House, that's what we talk about all day long. We give you tools to do whatever it is that you're here to do. That's going to be intuitive business practices like sales, marketing, branding. That also means learning about things like self-knowledge, spirituality, creativity, everything that you need to really expand as a person. I think that running a business is one of the biggest opportunities to level up and grow as a spiritual being. So join us twice a week to talk about everything you could possibly need to get the expansion pack and jump to the next level. Think of us as your metaphysical BFF who's kind of obsessed with productivity and intuitive business, but definitely has your human design chart memorized. We're pretty fun. I think you're going to love it. Make sure that you're subscribed to the podcast, and let's get into today's episode. Hi, Wallace.
Hi, Michelle. How are you?
I'm good. I am excited about today's episode because we are talking with someone about something that is near and dear to both of our hearts. Mystery. We're talking to Emily Torres, who is a law writer and the editor at The Good Trade, friend of the pod. We love The Good Trade here. They have a great daily newsletter, and it's an incredible resource website on slow living and conscious living, eco-conscious living. Mm-hmm. Emily is the managing editor there and is someone who discovered recently that she has ADHD and has been working through her ADHD diagnosis as a very organized, I would say, driven person. That diagnosis was surprising and has totally changed the way that she approaches her life, her relationships, her career, everything. And damn if that's not relatable.
Ain't that the truth? Emily wrote a really incredible article talking about her personal experience of discovering this diagnosis through the pandemic with her partner as well. And I think that whole piece about navigating this in a partnership and what that's like for both people, whether you are neurodivergent, both of you, or not. And Emily was very vulnerable about sharing a lot of what's worked for her, what hasn't worked, and also just the process of uncovering this throughout the pandemic. And as part of this series that we're doing right now, that we're calling Doing Things Differently, it's, I think I'll speak from the eye, but it's nonstop inspiring to understand and hear how people manage their nonlinear ADHD or neurodivergent diagnosis in different ways, because I always learn something from them and how they're maybe perceiving it differently, what their care community has recommended to them as strategies to cope. So I just feel like I have personally gained so much from people being vulnerable and sharing about this experience, just like Emily does in this episode.
So true. And I think when we're able to hear from people who don't have the sort of stereotypical, what we think of as neurodivergent attributes or whatever, we're not like, oh, squirrel, that's not someone with ADHD.
I mean, shiny stuff though.
Yeah, I do love glitter. But it's so self-identifying to be like, wait a second, I do that too. Oh, I didn't know that other people didn't do that. Wait, did I tell you that I recently took an autism spectrum test? Oh my God. Okay, so my sister's in grad school to become a therapist.
And she is like, you are now my patient. Patient zero.
Yeah. And, she recently got diagnosed with ADHD, and years ago I was like, girl, you have it. You got it. And she's like, no, I don't. We're so different. Well, she has it. And, she was like, you should take this test. I just took it. I scored really low, but I was surprised at how low I scored, but you should I'm just curious what you would end up with. So I took this test. The threshold is 63 points. I thought my first time I took it, I came in at 120 points.
Wait. Really? Wait, what kind of, what's the point system?
It's actually, the point system is physical sensation, right? Sensory, emotional, relational, I think organizational thinking. But some of the questions, you don't even realize that what you do that you've created this system to like, whatever,
function,
manage, right? So one of the questions is like about, do you wear things like, is what you wear, deeply influenced by how comfortable it is? So like, it wasn't that. It was like, do you only wear things that are comfortable to you, or do you pick comfort over fashion? And I was like, well, like
definitely
I picked
comfort.
Well, definitely comfort. But I was also like, well, I know what's comfortable, and then I've figured out what's fashionable of things that are comfortable. And I would never consider something I would never shop at a place that I know has uncomfortable clothes, even if they're cute, because they're uncomfortable. But I have found places that are comfortable and also fashionable. And I was like trying to explain this to my sister, and she was just like,
because I'm wicked smart.
She's like, I don't do that. And I was like, what? You don't? Doesn't everyone do that? And she's like, no, I don't do that. And I was like, oh, okay, that is maybe
like me.
Maybe you're onto something here. But it was just I'm still
clarifying moment of just these moments of, wait, you don't do that, or wait, you do that?
Yes, totally.
Other people don't?
Yeah. Okay, informative. But anyways, it just reminds me that it is so helpful to hear how other people do things, how other people think of things, whether it is totally relatable or maybe not. And to our point of this series, doing things differently, and at least having the choice to do things differently, right? And sometimes it's not until we're reflected back that there's another way, that there's a divergent strategy or a different strategy to tackle something in our lives. Are we aware of our choice making in the matter? So hopefully this episode will, number one, make you feel less alone if you're out there and you're working through a neurodivergent diagnosis. And number two, show you some ways to maybe make your life easier or reframe what you're tackling.
And I will also add, for me, Emily had a hot tip in there about laundry that really has had me thinking about how I will manage laundry once I am in school full time and also probably working. And I was like, laundry must go.
Yeah,
laundry must go.
Off the list.
It cannot stay. So hopefully, like Michelle said, you'll find some tips that you can, maybe employ yourself or feel less alone, because we got you. And the next few episodes in the series, we'll also be talking to another multi-hyphenate about resting. And then we are doing a special team episode about rest and how to rest when you're a multi-hyphenate / active, non-linear person trying to do a million projects and juggle a full life. How does one rest?
Seems obvious, but it's not.
No? Okay, that's it.
Okay.
See you on Friday and see you next week. And love you. Let's get into the episode.
In the earlier days at the Good Trade, we would come up, like when we were all in the office together, people would come up with like, the scratch disc is full error. And it was just funny because they like looked at me and they were like, Emily, what does it mean? I was like, I don't know, but I'll find out. And so that was a lot of my role, is to like support people and to be like, oh, I know where to find the answer. Give me 5 minutes.
Has that always been your identity? Like the fixer, the closer, the I'll figure it out type of person?
Yes. I think that, maybe not so much the fixer when I was younger, but it was very much, I'll just do it myself, or I will figure out myself. And I think it runs really strong in my entire family. And what also runs really strong in the entire family is when we can't fix it ourselves, we get very frustrated. So it's been kind of a coming into an adulthood of knowing how and when to ask for help, because things just won't get done if you don't have the support. And if you convince yourself that you're going to do it all the time.
Amen. I had a conversation recently with my dad about this exact thing, where he always used to have this saying or I don't know if it was a saying or he was just nagging me. He would always be like, Wallace, don't force it. If it doesn't work, don't force it. And he said, he was like, I was saying that to myself and trying to remind myself. And essentially what we were talking about was exactly what you just mentioned. This like shedding the idea of you can do it all yourself. And if you can't figure it out, you're going to somehow force it into being or like willfully work through it on your own, which just isn't always possible.
Yeah. I've been reflecting on it a lot in the last year or two. It's just got so much impact on your self-worth and trying to extricate that from like, oh, I can't do it all. It is okay if I can't do laundry. I set up a laundry service here in LA and they
I'm obsessed with that also. Can we talk about it?
It's amazing. So it at least gets me to the point where the laundry's done. I can't say the same for the laundry gets put away, but it's folded and it's clean and it's just like put the bag, get the bag the next day. And that's been such a help because I don't know, you don't realize like how much these things take energy for. And I'm really, you know, grateful and privileged to be able to do something like that. But I even got like my therapist was like, well, maybe you should, you know, ask for more help. And I was like, yeah. And then the next time I saw her, I was like, I got a robot vacuum. And she was like, I don't know if that's what I meant. And it actually was really, really like, it was exactly the help I needed. And it was fun. I was like having a good time with my robot vacuum. I gave it a name. I did the whole thing. And that was just like, I kind of knew that I needed that type of help. So that was really great.
We just launched right into what we all know, but maybe our audience doesn't know. Emily, you're diagnosed with ADHD. And I'm so curious because Wallace and I also are neurodivergent. And so are actually many of the people on our team. That's why we make a lot of programming and education for people with what we call squiggly brains. But I'm so curious for you, how did that come up? Because you were recently diagnosed. What gave you the inkling of like, this could potentially be me? Because you sound like someone in a leadership position. You sound like who really has their shit together. And that's not typically like the trope of having ADHD.
Yeah, I think that's also just like what's so confusing about it sometimes. But if you kind of had a larger look at my life outside of my work, you would probably see plenty of signs. But so I got diagnosed last year in the summertime, I think. And that was through a process of, you know, I kind of always growing up I just felt a lot. And I would go through days where I was like really energized and I could do everything and I wanted to rule the world and everything like that. But it would be followed by days of really, really devastating and debilitating like fatigue and depression. And throughout high school, I was learning about mental health and I was like, I'm bipolar. I'm definitely bipolar. I'm not. As I've gotten older, I've like taken a look at things a lot more holistically and learned a lot more about everything and realized I was just in like a cycle of, you know, energy burnout. And I took that very personally as if it was like a judgment on myself. So fast forward as I graduate high school, I go to college, get my jobs and everything. It's very structured, you know, like school is structured. I did well in school because it was, here's the rule, follow it. And I was like, yes, like here's the information, remember it, done.
Here's the deadline, do it.
Yep.
Yes. So I was like punctual. Everything was on time, but everything was always like last minute. You know, I was like getting to class always on time, but it was always right at the very end. And it was a lot of stress for me. And it led to me putting a lot of pressure on myself. So once COVID hit, there's so much to unpack between, you know, college and COVID, but COVID really, the lockdowns started to really shine a light on where I was. And actually, to rewind here, my husband and I moved out to Los Angeles in 2015. And at the time I was working from home And I was working with my mom doing data entry, and I was doing like a lot of just remote work. And we moved out to Los Angeles, and I did not know anybody except for my husband. And so that was all of a sudden, I was, 6 months into marriage in a new city with somebody who had been with for like 7 years at that point, but it was all very new, and I was really struggling and really, really, really needed to get out of the house. So I found a assistant editor role at the Good Trade and was like, oh, I'll do this for a little while. Turns out it's absolutely fabulous. I love my colleagues. I love the work we do. There's so much trust and genuine people in this team, and I absolutely adore it. So that helped for a while because I was starting to go into the office, and I was like, the deadlines were back, and all of the structure kind of came back. Then COVID came, and the structure was less there. And for the first year, we were in such a reactive state that I just was running off of adrenaline fumes, if you will.
Yeah.
And it was around that time, around 2020, that my husband first got diagnosed with ADHD. And
Whoa.
And that was something that I was like, we had talked about it for years. I was like, for some reason, I was like, I know you have this. Like, I know. And I think he knew too. And when he finally got that diagnosis, it led him to do even further digging and everything. And that led to, as I was learning more about it and like really seeing how it was manifesting in our relationship, I realized that it was definitely a two-way street. I was looking at all my coffee mugs laid out around the house. I was looking at my piles. Everything was just like very indicative of ADHD. And so I was really nervous to pursue a diagnosis because I felt that stigma still, even though my husband was diagnosed with it. And I was like, oh, that's fine. Like, that's great. His brain works that way. And I was like still hesitant on my end because I was like, well, my brain can't work that way. Right. And that is so huge, with neurodivergence is like, the stigma around everything is just so painful, I think, for a lot of people. And it feels very uncomfortable to talk about because it feels like you're admitting this like huge vulnerability, but you know that it's not. You have like, I know I operate from piles, but I also get to do some really creative stuff. And I really do like, the kind of shenanigans I get into. I try a lot of new things. I explore a lot of new things, and I want to hear new ideas and all that. And it's like kind of, we always just focus on not always, because I know you all do a great job of this, but like it feels like the narrative is so centered on the hyper kid, the fidgety kid, the like chaotic person. And there is chaos, but it's also like, it is not a flaw. And that was something I really came to terms with both my husband. And then I started pursuing my own diagnosis, and he's been last year was diagnosed with autism. And so that really propelled us to start zooming way out and realizing like, we have created a lot of systems because they were the systems that we saw other people doing. But every meal plan, every chores list, every 10-minute cleanup every day kind of routine that we tried to set, he would get going with it and he would be like, this is great. 10 minutes a day, we clean. I love this. And after a while, I would get bored with it. And so it was just constantly trying to find that balance of like routine and novelty. And so it's just been a really lengthy conversation, and I'm not here to say that I've figured any of it out. It's just like I'm learning more about what I don't know. And as I get older, I'm really glad that I'm I'm learning more about what I don't know, but I'm feeling more confident that I can figure it out. Like, it is important to know that I do not know it all, to me. So that's kind of the story of like the whole lead up to all of this. Yeah, I had been, discussing with doctors and everything for years and years about like depression, anxiety, and that was really helpful. And I felt like I got kind of a unicorn doctor where like I spoke with them and they were like, well, yep, sounds like ADHD. Cool. And, for my husband, I had to fill out like a survey to tell the doctor that, yes, this is stuff he deals with. And for me, they just, I was very fortunate. I don't think that's the case for a lot of people. I think a lot of people have to go through a lot more process of doubt.
I loved what you said about you basically inherited these systems, right, from like society at large, probably family of origin, work, that you both were just kind of trying on and trying to apply to yourselves when really like they probably don't quite fit you. What's been your process of identifying the systems? Because they're invisible and they're everywhere. We don't really realize how many systems are created that just don't serve us. And we've never perhaps like done an inventory of like, does that actually work for me? Like, for example, laundry. Like, does doing laundry actually work for me? Or like, does taking something to the post office actually work? It's impossible for me. It's truly impossible for me. Like, I just can't do it.
Yeah.
It is so bad. And the neighbors, like for the last 4 generations of neighbors who've lived in this apartment, do not have forwarding addresses still set up. And so we just have a bunch of mail and packages. And I'm like,
that's a whole.
This isn't even like my stuff.
That's a new level.
So it's like this conflicting sense of like, I feel guilty that it's been a long time, but I also like, it's not been in my capacity to do that stuff. So as far as like identifying those systems, I think very much still in the process of it. But one of the things that I started doing in the last year was kind of letting go of some of the things that I've been so stringent with myself about. So, for years, I would do morning pages, and it had to be in the same color of pen, and it had to be in cursive, and it had to be in the same type of notebook. And lately, I've really tried to just like do something different just to kind of throw myself off a little bit. I've always been a pens person. So I always have pens. I have 4 pens next to me right now in case one is bad, in case I don't like.
What kind are they?
They're a variety. I got an Office Max. I've got one from my vet, like that I've really liked in the past. I have no idea where this one came from. It's broken. And then this one's like one of those super goopy ones, the Pilot G210.
I love that you have a broken one.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I have there's a promotional pen somewhere around here that I like almost grabbed too, but I was like 4 pens is enough. But I've worked on like being like, okay, let's start by shaking the little things that I'm rigid about. So, I started an art journal. And at first I was like, one color. It has to be this one color. It has to be neat. It has to be like aesthetic and beautiful and everything. And I put a lot of pressure on myself. And then as I was just like navigating all of this, I was like, why am I putting pressure on myself to make an art journal look good, even though like that's like the point of it, is like I wanted to be a little chaotic. So I don't know if it was like, it wasn't super gradual. It was pretty rapid where I suddenly was like, all right, get out all the pens, my gel pens, my permanent markers, everything. Everything that I've not wanted to use because I don't want it to like be used up.
I can relate to that.
Yes.
Like, I like this so much, I don't want to use it.
Were you stickers people?
Yes. Oh my gosh, I had a sticker box that I just would look at. I wouldn't use them.
Yes. And like the 3D stickers or the fuzzy ones, like those are extra special. So like I never use them.
Oh, the fuzzy ones. Oh.
So good. And I even like, I found in my old sewing kit from high school, I found like a set of Sharpies that I had purchased. And at the time, you know, I was making like $7 an hour, a minimum wage in Indiana, which was like ungodly for, you know, 16, 17-year-old me. So I purchased these Sharpies and never used them because I was like, I spent a lot of my money, of my time on getting these. And so I pulled those out. I was like, you know what? We're going to get more Sharpies someday. We'll get them. And so I just started tearing up magazines, just getting really ridiculous with the Elmer's glue, stapling things, just trying to like use those resources that I had been really precious of because I didn't want them to go to waste. And that was so powerful for me because like it was letting myself do something that I thought I wasn't allowed to do. And I think that was just a bit of a shakeup to kind of start doing those things of like, oh, my systems are like kind of actually bumming me out, you know? The rules I have about how many clothes I can have or like all of these very arbitrary things that I felt meant something more, I started realizing didn't mean anything. And I knew they were comforting for me. And I think that's really important to acknowledge.
Yeah.
But it began kind of a cycle of like, I started to be a little bit more impulsive with like, I'm going to go out of town for the weekend. I'm going to go do something new. I'm going to learn how to cook something I've never cooked before. And then I ended up last year going, to Spain for about 2 weeks. And the first like 5 days were with a friend. And then the rest of it was by myself. And I'd never been abroad. I spoke a little Spanish. I'd never, you know, navigated trains, much less in Spain. And, I went to 5 different cities that whole time. And it was just like, I think to answer your question is I haven't addressed all of the systems that have been difficult for me, but I have been trying to shake myself up in the sense that like doing things that I never thought I could do or doing things that, I was waiting for someone else to do for me. Like I was waiting for someone else, you know, it did take me for my friend to be going to Spain to ask me to go. And I was like, you can just do that. And so as I'm navigating forward, I'm still trying to embrace those things that shake things up a bit.
Yeah, so much of what you're saying resonates, Emily, and especially, I don't know if this is something that you associate with ADHD, which I do now kind of in hindsight, is struggling with perfectionism and having it prevent me from just getting started, from sharing things that I'm making, from publishing things, from probably sometimes being just myself in situations and not knowing it. And I think sometimes systems and Michelle, not only working with Michelle, but I think a lot of the work that we do to overcome the fear of perfectionism has helped me see how some of my systems can help me do that. On the days where I'm like, I don't feel like it. It's not good enough. It's not ready. It's not perfect. And I'm curious if that's something that you've been feeling too, as you spend more time in the creative realms, but have this knowledge of your patterns from having ADHD.
Yeah, I think, I totally agree. I've been a perfectionist. It's kind of like, if I, try something new, historically, if I've tried something new and I'm really bad at it, I don't want to do it. I'm like, nope, that's done. Or if I try something and I'm marginally good at it, I decide I'm going to make it into a business. And so there's really like there's not a
all
lot
or
of
nothing.
You're right. Yes. And that's been something I've really noticed is like, I have a really strong pattern of all or nothing thinking. And it's like, I had nice handwriting. So I was like, I'm going to go into calligraphy. That's it. That's done. And
yeah, I've done the opposite where I'm like, I didn't like my handwriting, so I'm just not going to use paper anymore.
It is really, really, I think there are some protective things in there where it's like, okay, sometimes it's a gut feeling or a gut instinct to be like, oh, I like this. This is direction for me. But it's not always like the answer, which we really, really want it to be the answer.
Right.
Like whenever I get a good idea, I'm like, I really want this to be the one. The thing that like all of a sudden everything clicks and I only like this one thing. And that's just so much easier for me because I usually like everything. And so that struggle with perfectionism is very, very inhibiting. I've found that that's been kind of adjacent to like with my art journal. I've tried a lot more to be bad at things. And I've tried a lot more to, not even tried, but like I've allowed myself to make more mistakes and have had to like sit with the discomfort of like letting someone down and not keeping my word on something or canceling plans again or, and it's allowing myself to not do the people pleasing thing, which the people pleasing also includes myself, where I'm like trying to prove to myself that, I'm worthy or, I value, and it's usually like accompanied by some monetary angle. It's like goes to the business thing. Like I'm going to start a business and I'm going to be, it'll be great. I'll be famous. No, it's okay.
Everything will be solved.
Yeah.
Right.
I can so relate to that idea of like finding the thing, like hoping to land on the thing that'll make it big for you. And I think something that really helped me when I started holisticism was not putting the pressure of it to be the thing and kind of just knowing that one door opens the next. And there doesn't have to be a big thing. Like the big thing is me, at the end of the day, I'm it. And like, I can't predict what's going to hit necessarily. I'm sure you get this as a content creator. Sometimes you write a story and you're like, they're going to love this story. Everyone's going to be obsessed with this story. And then it's like the lowest reach of everything that's been written in that week. Yeah, exactly. Like, and sometimes you write something and you're like, oh, this is such a whatever throwaway story. And it like goes viral and you've been boosting it for like 6 months because it just gets people in, right? It's so good.
Yeah.
You kind of never know. And I feel like it's actually like a little bit the same. Even if you're really an intuitive person, it's the same with like our work and our business. You have an idea. You think what something might really pop off, but like, you never know. You never know when it's going to be. And how you're going to get there,
Right? Yeah. And I think I've followed along with holisticism for years now. I think we first were in touch way back when I first started at the Good Trade in, I think, 2017. And I think it was probably more my colleagues that were in touch with you, but I know we were like in contact, and I've seen how holisticism has like continued to evolve, and it's just really cool because it's like it blossoms from your interests. And I think it's a double-edged sword, honestly. So, on the one hand, like I started my work as kind of an assistant, like doing the social media posts, inputting into the blog and kind of doing those things. And now my role is editorial director, and I oversee all the things. I look over growth and newsletter and affiliate and partnerships, and I'm creating and I'm doing all these things. And what that is that throughout the years, me and our founder, Amy Ann, have developed a rapport to where I know what I'm good at. She knows what I'm good at. And she trusts me when I'm like, I'd like to try this thing. And so my role has become what it is now based on what my interests have been and where my strengths have lied. And that is so cool. And also, it gets very, very complicated when you're trying to untangle yourself from who you are at work. And I'm not sure if you felt this way, either of you, where it's like so much of what I do is a result of like what I'm interested in and who I am and what values I have. Then when it comes time to be like, okay, well then who am I outside of what I do? It's like, well, I'm what I do. And I think that's been a really big sticking point for me, especially lately. It's like I want a little bit of a firmer line between those things. I don't think I'm going to ever have like a full line, a full just like straight border between those two.
I wonder if that distinction between what you like and what you do, sort of like hobbies versus like your work, it's also, I think, a function of just the society we live in capitalism and the amount of time that we have to spend at work in order to survive, like away from our families, away from free time. And then I think you tack onto that having maybe ADHD or being a nonlinear thinker. And a lot of our energy is spent like trying to manage things in our brain, right? Like tasks and dates and to-dos and whatever, that any free energy that could be spent on like, I don't know, trying to get better at that hobby that you're slightly interested in, there's nothing left. And you have to add some artificial fuel to it. Like maybe I'll turn it into a business in order to like bump it to the top of your consciousness. I don't know if that makes sense, but
I feel like that hits hard.
Yeah. So it's like a combination of both the things, right? And again, it feels like another example of a system that doesn't necessarily fit for a lot of people, like the system of capitalism, the system of how we work. It doesn't suit us 100%.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think I'm so grateful to have landed where I've landed at this moment. But I also think that like, it's just going to be a consistent journey is trying to untangle that. And I think I could be working at I could be working anywhere. I could be working at Sonic Drive-In, which I did when I was in high school. And I could be like, well, I'm a roller skating person now. Like that's who I am. Somebody who likes to roller skate and hang out. Like it is very, very hard to disentangle.
Today's podcast episode is sponsored by Oura Ring. Oura Ring is a health and wellness tracker that is chic. It is cool. And honestly, it makes me feel really good about myself. In my experience as a wellness obsessee for many, many years, most of the fitness trackers or wellness trackers that I've used actually made me feel unwell. And the Oura Ring doesn't do that, which I love. I started using my Oura Ring when I found out I was pregnant, and I literally felt like I was an alien living inside of a human body. I had no idea really like how to establish a baseline for how I was doing on a day-to-day basis. My body was changing. I wasn't moving as much as I was used to. I couldn't exercise in the ways that I loved to. And I was super sick for like the first 7 months of being pregnant. And having an Oura Ring just honestly give me the baseline of how my sleep was, how I was recovering, and how much I was moving every single day made a really big difference in not only my mental health, but my physical health. I can't say enough great things about Oura Ring. In fact, I've bought them for like many people in my life because I love them so, so much. And I'm elated that they're sponsoring this podcast for the next month. I think that now is one of the best times that you can go try Oura Ring if you're interested. From May 4th to May 14th, Oura Ring is running a Mother's Day promo, and select styles are up to $50 off, which is a really sweet deal. I have the plain circular gold band, and I love it. It looks very chic. You can't even tell that it's like a wellness tracker. It looks really cool. I like it a lot. And if you're anything like me, you're someone who trusts their body, trusts their intuition, but also loves information and views intuition as information just as much as analytics, I think you'll really love the Oura Ring in your life. Not only is the actual hardware incredible, but the software is amazing. The app has built-in meditations, movement, mindfulness exercises. It's so supportive in helping round out your holistic health. So go check out auraring.com/holisticism and save $50 on your Oura Ring from now until May 14th.
I'm curious, in your role and throughout this diagnosis, what has changed for you as a creative, whether it's systems you use at work or at home, even if it's just your own creative work, but also curious how that's affected even your work with your colleagues and at the Good Trade. It was so nice to read the article that you wrote for the Good Trade talking about it and kind of having this, for lack of a better term, like coming out moment of public acknowledgement, I guess. Was that the first time you had talked about it?
Yeah, so I had spoken about it with my colleagues last year, and I spoke to my mom about it, and I'm from the Midwest where these things are a little bit more stigmatized, and so it was a challenge, but I also really wanted to write about it for the Good Trade. Like, I wanted to share, because I also wanted people to know that, like, there's folks who are just in the early stages and they don't really know what's going on, and we're trying to figure this out as we go. And I don't want people to feel alone or like everybody else on the internet has their shit together. Like, and that's kind of always what if you look back at my track record of authored pieces, there's a lot of like talk about the pressures of a perfect home and trying not to take yourself too seriously and stuff like that. And so you can actually like map backwards if you look at what I've written in the past.
I was going to say your breadcrumbs, everything's starting to come together.
Very much so, yes. And so I wanted to write about it, and also like just like the more entrenched I was getting into like the neurodivergent Reddit threads and all that, I realized like there were so many people, especially women, who were like diagnosed at such a late age, like 30s, 32 for me, but like 40s, 50s, and 60s even, like people who were getting diagnosed because their kids were getting diagnosed. And it just like that made me want to talk about it because I wanted our readers to feel seen in a way that like I was wanting to be seen, you know, and acknowledged for that. But I did have the conversation with my team about it, and they've been so receptive, and then I can't recall exactly how I came across it, but I discovered Notion, and then I discovered Notion for Magical Baddies, and I absolutely loved, like, the System Spells course was, like, so powerful for me because some of the things that was, like, you know, wherever you see a pile, that's a system that might not be working for you. And I looked around and I was like, oh boy, everything is a pile. You know, from
my life is one big pile.
Like from the literal to, you know, the intangibles like email, and then to the like emotional is like what I was holding on to and everything. And so I think a lot of my work has been on the emotional and internal side, but I am very actively using Notion now to try to help with my tasks and my ideas and stuff like that.
Amazing.
The IRL piles, not doing so great, but you know what? I think that's one thing too, is like with my creativity,
one thing at a time.
It's really, really kind of like a reclamation as well as a relinquishment of things at the same time, because I need to let go of the things that I can't control. But I also deserve to take up space, and I deserve to share something that I like, or that I want to share with people. But I also have to relinquish like the feeling that like, oh, this is going to be the big thing. This is going to be the really big thing. That's the next step. And so it's been kind of going against my nature to a certain extent. But I see it a little bit more as like, I don't have any sisters, but I just envision it as like my older sister being like, hey buddy, you're doing okay. Like, let it go and just keep doing keep following those interests, because those are what brought you here today.
Mm-hmm. And arguably, like, where your genius is having all of these disparate different interests and things that sort of like tickle your brain, you know, or feel like winks from the universe of like, this is a path. And somehow bringing all those things together, you know, it's like making a potion of all your unique interests, and like what comes out is like your version of gold that the world needs. And I think a lot of people who are like us, who think like us, that's like very shameful to have so many interests. It feels like maybe you're flighty or a loose cannon or just like whatever. That's so Michelle to start something and then leave it behind 6 months later, to be like all in, and then for example, be an ultra marathon runner and then decide I don't want to run anymore after like 4 years and never run again. And you can either look at it as like, wow, it's so embarrassing. Or again, like, oh yeah, these are all the doors that are like opening me to get me to the next thing. And I get to use this information from my past lives or my other interests and apply it to new things. And I think that's like why people who are neurodivergent are changing the world, because we see the world in a different way, and we see solutions in a different way. And that's really what we need right now, is like, because the old solutions are not working, I would say. Yeah. I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know. Got me crazy.
That absolutely strikes me as well. I have also thought a lot about self-trust in the last year, and I wrote a piece as well on that. And it's a pain point, because I have had so much of a narrative around myself of like, I'm flaky, I'm flighty. I start things that I always end. Like, I always stop things. Like 2020, I started a Substack. Okay. And I decided to send it daily.
Oh my God. Emily.
And it was
Emily.
from 0 to 50. And so it was like, it started off as these like kind of chunky like musings, like essays. And then it evolved to like shorter, like kind of poetry snippets. And I beat myself up over that, because I was like, well, it's not what it was. So it's shorter, and it's not, I felt like I copped out. And then I slowly moved away from it and eventually stopped. And that, the shame of that was, looking back, I have nothing but compassion for myself on that moment. But I felt so terrible, and like I had just put myself out there and failed. And everybody had seen that I started something, and it was no longer there. And it was around that time that I also like jumped off Instagram and kind of started like shutting down online, because I was like, oh, I'm not consistent. So why, cultivate all
show up at all?
Yes.
Yeah.
Again, all or nothing. And
I very much have that online still. I'm like, I will show up for 24 hours and then I will be gone for 12 months.
Yes. And I think it's then like you were like, well, I can't post now because it's been too long.
Oh, yeah. Everyone will be like, what's wrong with her?
And I actually just like came back on Instagram and like archived all of my old posts, because I was like, these don't actually speak to me anymore. There's been like 3 years since I was on. And I think I think that's super valid, but it was just like, I felt so like I was trying so hard at something, and now I'm going to come back and just try so hard at it again, or something like, it was all full of a lot of self-judgment. And, like looking back at my, my Substack, I think I resent a handful of editions, but I think I sent like 100 some different things. Like I showed up
That's
for
impressive.
like 100 days.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
And I think that we so often just see the end of things and just the end and the beginning. And we don't see like I didn't realize that I had even hit 100 days until like 3 years later. I looked back and I was like, really? I actually sent this many? I don't remember a lot of 2020. I think that might be a common thread with people who are facing, that year. But yeah, we just focus so much on the negative. It's that negativity bias where it's like, oh, I stopped this, so I'm insert something terrible about myself here.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I have so much compassion for all of us and our little creative, juicy brains, but also picturing us, I don't know what either of you actually look like young. I'm like, Michelle, I need those baby pictures. But just thinking of younger selves or even ourselves right now, or like our inner squiggly brained kid. And I just want to hug them because I feel like I go sometimes in this place in my head where I'm like, well, don't make it always about gender. But I do hear often, I think about my male friends who are very casually like, oh yeah, I did that once. Like I was super into marathons and then I got bored and then I went and did like jujitsu and then I got bored and then I started 3 companies and they all failed and whatever. Yeah. And they're like, and now I'm doing this thing and I'm really into it, but they're not like, they don't have these stories and narratives around it in terms of confirming another, or maybe they do and they don't share them. I'm sure there's that. It's not like they don't have their own narratives, but I think there is something about this late diagnosis for a lot of people for ADHD where it's maybe not getting the attention that we really needed to be able to have compassion and not make a story out of something and not make a bigger narrative out of changing our minds, moving on, having multiple interests.
Yeah. And like the frustration that comes with all of it is like in the past I've gotten, and I still will get pushed to the edge on certain things with frustration. But like when I was younger and I would get frustrated about something, it was that I was maybe being difficult or I was being really sensitive, or it felt like there was a flaw with me and not with like my response or like how I was managing myself or, the self-soothing and a lot of that. Like I would make a mistake and immediately make a judgment about myself. And that's some of my earliest memories is like not doing well at something and just going absolutely crazy on myself internally, like from a very young age. And it's funny you say that, Wallace. I around last year, around the time that I got diagnosed, I actually pulled out a photo of me as a kid and I sat it at my desk and I looked at it every day, multiple times a day. I got my old poetry from high school out and I read that. I had to put it away because it was getting too emotional for a bit, so I had to take a rest. But I was looking back at all the ways that I had, thought poorly of myself because of the way because of my cycles where I would get really energetic and then really not, get really extroverted and then really not. So I had this little picture of me. I'm standing in front of I think it's like a lavender bush, maybe. I don't know. It might not be. But I'm holding there's young authors in my school. I was in kindergarten and I had written this book. And it was first of all, hilarious. A total knockoff of The Ugly Duckling, which just for brevity's sake.
The Ugly Chicken.
I might have called it The Ugly Duck. It was something like that. But
this is an adult narrative. Yeah. There are no ducklings here.
But what I always find so poignant about it is that as a kid I wrote this and it's my kid drawings. My mom wrote the words that I was saying, and what the story of this wasn't that the duck grew up into something beautiful. It was that the duck was so ugly and nobody liked him. And one day a fairy came and changed him to be beautiful. And then everybody loved him. And that narrative has stuck with me so strongly in my life.
Mm-hmm.
It's something I wrote when I was 6, but I look at that and I'm like, oh, I thought I was bad. Like, I thought that I was so irredeemably weird or sensitive or, you know, flaky that I needed some sort of like miracle to change into something that would fit with my peers or with the world around me. And that's like, I just like, maybe I was 6 and maybe I just was like trying to make it a little bit different from the ugly duckling. But at the same time, I still like carry that with me. And so I think a lot about that and about, you know, what young me carried. And not like because of like external circumstances. It was just like, I had friends. I still have friends. Like I was creative and adventurous and, we had a lot of like family time together and everything. It just was this internal world that I like carried with me for so long.
And I was just thinking, as you said that, like how many examples of that are reinforced in pop culture constantly to us. And it's like, it's so sad that is a tale as old as time in many ways, that hopefully that's changing a little bit for younger kids, but I'm not so sure about that.
Yeah. And Emily, we often ask as our last question, because I know we're running out of time, what you would whisper in the ear of your past self or your future self. You can pick one, but I'm kind of curious what you would whisper in the ear of 6-year-old Emily.
Yeah, I think what's hard about this is that I kind of don't think I would want to change anything.
Yeah.
I
get that.
Probably more want to just like sit and listen and like validate whatever young me was feeling. If I was like, you know, wanting to be one of the cool kids at school, I'd be like, that's understandable. Like, instead of being like, no, you don't want that. Or, yeah, you are a cool kid. Or like, I would just like, kind of like hold that space. And, because I think that was something I always really wanted, was to be taken seriously. And, it led to a lot of like, to this day, I've got a lot of like comedic coping mechanisms, which I'm kind of like, I'm working on, but I do enjoy them sometimes. But like,
gotta laugh.
Yeah, I love a pun.
You and my husband would get along. He's a punisher, as he likes to say.
Oh my gosh. Amazing.
Yeah. That was one of my favorite parts of The Last of Us. I don't know if you guys watched it, but
the pun book.
The pun book. That's where I tuned in. I was like, now I get what this relationship.
I know. I love
It's all about the puns.
It's so sweet. And this is a very big aside, but I'm a gamer and I haven't played that game, cool. But I made my husband like not play it until I was home so I could watch it. So, but yeah, I think that's the biggest thing that I would do for my younger self. And now that I'm saying that out loud, I feel like maybe that's what I want from my future self. So maybe that's what I could probably extend to myself now a little bit more, is that validation.
That's so sweet. Every time we ask this question, there is no wrong answer. I just am constantly surprised and inspired by what people say, including what you just said. I'm like, that's so beautiful. It's so wonderful to, you know, we wouldn't be here necessarily if it wasn't for all of that we experienced. And I think that's really, really sweet.
Yeah. I think I've been kind of leaning hard into the self-compassion, maybe more so than I need to. Like, maybe I'm going from very minimalist, like strict systems to kind of like, I don't know, let's just see how it goes. And I think just like finding that balance and just like exploring that self-compassion is so important.
Absolutely.
Emily, this was so great. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. And, I think a lot of people are going to relate to your experience and into your story. So thank you so much for spending the time with us. How can people follow your work or your Substack or whatever comes next for you?
Yes.
You can follow my work at The Good Trade, thegoodtrade.com, and you can subscribe to The Daily Good. We're such a small team that so much of all of us is like very, very much inside those vehicles. So you'll see articles by myself and my team daily, which is just funny that I decided to also do a daily thing on my end. But on Instagram, you can follow me at NRE. And I can't guarantee consistency. I can't guarantee anything there.
Lots of fun.
But I want to like play. So if you're down to clown, or see my rabbits and my cat, like that's the place to find me.
Thank you so much, Emily. This was so lovely.
Thank you both. I really appreciate all of the work you do and all of the like compassion you've helped me find through the systems. And like, I think there's such a balance between those systematic things as well as the things that extend grace to ourselves. So I really appreciate all the work you do on your end.
Oh, thanks, Emily. It means the world. We appreciate you.
I'm like, I really want to hug.
I know.
Like, I feel so like cozy and warm. I don't always feel this way on like Zoom, and I'm like,
right. Same with with all of our younger selves. I'm like, oh, yes, you're okay, you're good. Like,
everyone's okay. The 12th is produced by yours truly, Wallace Miller Blanchard. Our theme music is made by Nathan McKay, and our wonderful editing is done by Softer Sound Studios, who you can find more information about in our show notes.